friends, it's Sophia. So this is my first video that I'm like properly filming in my dorm. I know I filmed that little update video earlier, but I don't think that really counts as a video. Sorry if you can hear my fan running. It's hot in here for some reason. I don't know. So today's video is something that is really important to me. I wanted to make a video about my mental health journey for a while, to be honest, but I've been honestly pretty nervous about the stigma that comes along with it. And I also know that I have several family members who watch my YouTube channel, and I just want to say it's going to get kind of dark. And if you don't want to hear me talk about like what I've been through in the past, like if that's distressing for you to hear about, click off this video. Like I'm not here to make anyone upset, but if you want to hear about what I've been through and my experience with mental illness, then keep watching, I guess then. I'm hoping to make this video because I know in my personal experience, at least, I was absolutely terrified to come out and tell anyone that something was wrong. And I really wish that I had gotten treatment sooner and that I had not felt so stigmatized. And, that's by no fault of my parents or anything like that. It's, just the way that I perceived my illness to be such in, society that I felt like I couldn't come forward. So if this video, helps even just, one person, if not, fully admit that they have a mental illness, but at least, helps them in their journey of discovering, it'll be worth it to me. So, basically, I'm just gonna talk through kind of when I first had symptoms, up until present, and, I have taken some notes, so that's what this is gonna be. I also have my journal with me, because I kept a journal from when I was 13 until now. Obviously I'm not going to read all, all of it, because it's really personal, but, there are certain, excerpts and stuff like that that I'm going to reference because, I do talk about, specifically some of the symptoms that I was having and, what it was like at the time. So that's what I'm going to be referencing. I should mention that I've been diagnosed with clinical depression. The exact extent and details of that, I've never been told what subtype I have or anything like that. I don't know. But I can tell you I did get blood work done. So there's that at least. So I'm just gonna start off basically with the very first time I had any kind of symptoms that I can remember. And I've had symptoms, I tell people I've had symptoms for my entire life, which is true, because the earliest time I remember having symptoms is one of my first memories. So my first memory is my third birthday, and then I remember having symptoms at probably age 5 or 6, something along those lines. So I would have been in kindergarten or grade 1. I don't remember a ton of the circumstances around the experience. I just remember kind of feeling low and not really worthy. And I think I wrote a note, which was essentially the childhood equivalent of a will. I didn't have any intent to harm myself at the time, I don't think. And when you're that young, you don't really know how to process these kind of emotions. And so I wrote this note and I gave it to my sister. And I was like, oh, read over this. This is a note for when I get old and die. And she's like, this doesn't look good. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's good. And then she was like, okay. So that's the first time I remember having symptoms. And to be honest, my symptoms kind of stayed low grade moderate. My experience with depression has been such that in my daily life, I'll almost always have some kind of symptom, low grade symptoms. So that's going to be maybe an intrusive thought or feeling just kind of physically heavy or just a low mood, generally speaking. Usually it's intrusive thoughts. I'll have intrusive thoughts basically every day. And it's not something that really typically bothers me until other symptoms are incorporated. So I'd say for most of elementary school, I had intrusive thoughts occasionally. which if you're not familiar with the term intrusive thoughts, or you don't really know what that is, it's essentially when you will have a thought that you didn't consciously think. So, for example, let's say you're going through a checklist of things that you want to do in your day, right? And you're thinking in your head, like, you're saying, I need to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And it's all, like, purposeful, right? Like, you may not control the exact train of what you're going to say, but you expect what's going to happen, right? An intrusive thought, it's kind of hard to describe, but the best way I can say it is that it just kind of pops in your head, and then you think it, and then it goes away. And it's completely involuntary. But it is your thoughts. Like, this is different from, like, auditory hallucinations, where you hear something outside of your head, and you perceive that as being real. Intrusive thoughts are inside your head, and you know that they're not real, you know that it's, like, in your brain, but it's in, like, your normal, like, internal monologue voice, or at least it is for me. So, yeah, I did not have a good elementary school experience, so I think this probably contributed to it, and so I kind of had, like, low-grade, like, symptoms of, like, kind of unworthiness, intrusive thoughts, like, occasionally, but I wouldn't say it's to the, like, where I've ended up now, where it's kind of, like, low-grade every day all the time, for the most part, until I hit puberty, and then it all went bad. In grade 6 and 7, I started getting some more, like physical symptoms that you'd get with major depressive disorder, and, then in grade 7, I also, at the end of grade 7, I moved away from my hometown to a completely different city, 500 kilometers away, and that was honestly, like, I don't like using the word trauma, because I know other people have, like, like, experiences that are actually traumatic. I don't think this was actually traumatic for me, but it was a really big change, and it was really difficult for me, especially at such an impressionable age, because I was 12, 13, and it was really difficult for me to just, like, uproot my life and, like, everything that I'd ever known, because I lived in my hometown literally since I was 2, so I didn't remember living anywhere except for there. So that was really hard, and then also at the same time, I had, like, an identity crisis, as you do when you're 13, and I was, like, questioning my sexuality and my gender identity, like, all at once, and, so you can imagine all that stuff combined is really hard, and then on top of that, everyone in my family got pneumonia that fall, and so that made all of my symptoms a lot worse. So for me, being stuck inside, being socially isolated, like we are right now, it really fuels my mental health symptoms and makes them a lot worse. So, like, I could be doing, like, totally fine, and then if I'm forced to not be busy or stay home for an extended period of time, it really takes a toll. And I'd be lying if I said quarantine was not difficult. Getting, adjusting all of my self-care routines that help, like, maintain a healthy mental state, like, incorporating those into quarantine was really hard. But that's neither here nor there. And so, I do have examples of some intrusive thoughts that I was having at the time, because as we'll see, they went from, like, pretty mild in, like, elementary school, and, like, early middle school to being, like, really severe, and, like, really, really, like, what's the word? Really, like, concerning and upsetting, because that's really the thing that intrusive thoughts do. It's not just that it, like, pops into your head and it's like, oh, well, it's not like you're like, oh, that's uncomfortable. It's like, after a certain point and at a certain severity of symptoms, you internalize those thoughts and you believe them to be true. So, at this time, some of my intrusive thoughts, which I've written down here, is fat, bitch, useless, no one cares about you, stupid, and so that's kind of where it was before. And then if we go, I'm going to skip over a little bit because my depression was pretty low grade for, like, a couple of years, maybe, like, the end of after all of the stuff with moving and everything, I had probably close to, like, 8 months of, like, low or, like, no symptoms, and then, at a certain point, I believe, I have it written down here that it was in, 2016, 2017, is my worst depressive episode that I've ever had, and I'm not gonna lie, like, almost killed myself, if I'm being brutally honest here. It was really, really tough, and, couldn't tell you how I did it, but I'm very glad that I did. And I wrote that down in my journal too. I wrote down that I'm really, really happy that I was able to make it through. And so then this particular episode lasted from, I want to say June or July of 2016 until February of 2017. So it was really long. The longest episode I've ever had, and by far the worst. But at least afterwards I got like 6 months of remission of no symptoms at all, which has never happened to me before or since. So basically, part of what made my depression so hard at the time is that obviously I wasn't in treatment. And during this episode was the first time I admitted that I had any kind of symptoms in my entire life. And I was 14. And in here I believe I was 14, yeah. And here I wrote that I was fully expecting to go until after I graduated before I got any kind of help because I was just so ashamed. Really glad I didn't do that. But part of what made it so hard is because when you're having these intrusive thoughts, your instinct is to automatically try and counter it with like realistic counterexamples, because these thoughts are just like completely coming out of nowhere, totally irrational, doesn't make any kind of sense. And you're trying to rationalize it, right? Depression doesn't care about rationalization. And so the more you try to rationalize it, the worse it gets. And so here, I have rationalized it to the point that now I'm having suicidal thoughts. And I'm trying to rationalize my way out of that. And it just doesn't work. And so this entry that I'm looking at right now is just me talking about some like positive affirmations that I did. Which if you have depression, that's really important that you try and like at least affirm how you're believing and try and redirect your attention to something more positive. Not about to give out therapy tips here because those weren't free, and your exact situation is completely different from mine, so my tips would probably not even really help that much anyways. So this particular episode and how most of my like depressive episodes go is usually I get like seasonal depression, which is it's more than just winter blues. And I'll explain, because a lot of the symptoms that I described for this worst episode that I had are the same as seasonal depression, but toned down a little bit. Of course, seasonal depression, or for some people seasonal affective disorder, can devolve into major depression, just depending on, you know, your particular circumstance or whatever your brain decides to do. But yeah, it's not just like feeling sad. I get that misconception a lot. A lot of people will say, oh, you're just feeling down. Like, just cheer up. You can't just cheer up from being depressed. And I'll explain why. So, first of all, the first sign that I get that I'm starting to have like a kind of a depressive episode is the intrusive thoughts. So first of all, it's milder ones, and some of the ones that I call mild, or like ones that are kind of, it's just kind of like in the back of your mind. Like you like kind of notice it, but it doesn't really bother you. It's not distressing or anything. It's just like stuff about like social situations. So like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Or like, oh, that person thinks I'm awkward now. Or something along the lines of, oh, I don't like myself. Stuff like that. That's kind of like that just kind of goes on in the back of your mind, and it's not like incredibly distressing. And then at a certain point, and the next points that I'm going to mention are kind of all happen roughly at the same time. So you start to feel really physically tired and heavy, and for me, it doesn't matter how many hours I sleep. It feels like I pulled an all-nighter. And I know, especially if you're a student, or if you were, have ever been to a sleepover where you stayed up all night and then it's the next day and you're just like totally bogged down and super heavy and you're like, you can't move. It's like that, but all the time, and it doesn't matter how much you sleep. So, and there's nothing you can do to mitigate it. It's, unless you're on medication, but, there's nothing you can do to mitigate just feeling this like overwhelming heaviness. It's like someone's tied weights all over your body and now they're like, okay, go function now. It's really hard. And then along with this, your intrusive thoughts become overwhelming. So instead of being just in the back of your mind, you can kind of ignore it. It becomes at the forefront of your consciousness. So you can imagine trying to have a conversation with someone, and every other thing that you say in your head, it's, I hate myself. That was awful to say. I'm a disgusting human being. All of these things just like popping forward in the front of your head all the time, and you can't ignore them. And so it makes it really overwhelming. And because of this, it makes it incredibly hard to concentrate, because all you have is this really like overwhelming tiredness, and then all of these awful things stirring around in your brain about things you've said, things that other people have said, anything like that, things about your self-worth, suicidal thoughts sometimes, even if you don't believe them, they're just kind of there. And so that's all kind of stewing around in your head. And then along with this, for me, I have a problem with overeating or comfort eating to deal with all of this that's going on in my head. Some people will undereat, and that's kind of like the other side of this coin. But for me, I'll just like eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and I'm never full, and I'll eat just to feel just to feel something. Which it sounds like something that people would say if they're sad, or they're having a down day. You just want to sit at home, watch Netflix, eat ice cream, because that's what feels good, right? But it's different than that, because it's like it's so hard to stop eating, because if you stop eating, you just feel completely empty. Like there's nothing there. Like, why even? And then along with this as well comes the lack of motivation. So it's really, really hard to motivate yourself to do things, partly because you feel so tired, and also everything just seems like such an overwhelming chore. If you can think of like your least favorite thing to do, like, I don't know, maybe you really hate doing laundry or dishes, or you really can't stand like mopping or sweeping or vacuuming, anything like that. If you can imagine your least favorite chore, the one that you absolutely dread doing, and now every single thing in your life is like trying to make yourself do that least favorite chore. So I have a hard time making myself shower, because it just seems so overwhelming that it's like too much. It's too much effort. I can't do it. Brushing my teeth, same kind of thing. It's really overwhelming. And then this also applies into schoolwork as well. And when I was doing dance, that too. It's really, really hard to motivate yourself to do anything beyond just lie in bed and want to not exist, because you have all these things going on in your head, and it's just incredibly overwhelming. And then if this continues on and it's not addressed, like it did in my 2017 episode, then you end up with suicidal thoughts that you don't believe, and if you leave it long enough, then you actually believe these intrusive suicidal thoughts that you should kill yourself, and that you're actually not, you actually internalize what your, intrusive thoughts are thinking. And then it's just like completely debilitating. I know some people have had worse cases of depression than this, but I remember taking a lot of like self-assessment tools when I was feeling this way, and it was, all of them were like severe. So I imagine this is kind of like on the like extreme end of what you can experience. And this episode is bad enough. I would not wish it on my worst enemy. And I mean that sincerely. This I would say is equivalent to a traumatic physical injury and having to spend several months in hospital. It's nearly undescribable. And the reason I want to tell you guys about it is because I feel like obviously there's a lot of stigma around feeling like you can't talk about your emotions, or feeling like, oh, you're just sad, you're just feeling down, or like, a lot of people, I've had some people in my life who have just not understood, and sometimes it's hard to understand why I like cannot make myself do certain things, why it's just too overwhelming and I cannot do it. And part of recovery and part of treatment is being gentle with yourself. And that's really, really hard when you have depression. And if I can, I think, get one message out of this video, it's that being gentle with yourself, regardless of whether or not you have a mental illness like I do, is incredibly important. And you have to make sure that you're looking after yourself, because your physical health is just as important as your mental health. And if you're not looking after your mental health and your physical health, it's going to cause a lot of problems. So I just want to emphasize to you guys that if you're feeling this way, if you think you might have some kind of a mental illness, it is so important to get help. So important. It's the best thing you'll ever do for yourself. I regret not doing it for myself earlier. And like I said earlier in the video, if this can inspire one person to talk to their doctor or talk to a family member or a trusted friend, it's worth it for me. And I really just want to encourage people to, you know, support your loved ones if they have mental illnesses. I know it can seem really scary and like it's a lot, but just being a person in their life who's willing to listen to them makes a world of difference. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. And I have another video idea that I hope to get out soon. It's definitely more silly than this one. And yeah, well, thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, friends.